Today is day 120. 4 months ago, Shirley and I decided, coinciding with the time when Archbishop Rhodey suspended the requirement for the obligation for Sunday Masses, Mass attendance, Shirley and I decided at that time to go ahead and hunker down on account of this COVID-19 thing. And it's been, to say the least, a very interesting 120 days, watching the things that have transpired and watching and listening to the argumentation surrounding the validity of actions and things, that decisions that have been made, and not only those at a higher level, but even at a very personal level. How it seems like absolutely everything anymore, whether a word spoken or an action taken, creates shock waves. People are so reactionary to things that's going on, and one of the things about shock waves, whether it's shock waves created by words spoken or shock waves created by actions taken, shock waves always have ripple effects that go on and on and on and on. And once those shock waves have been created, and many of them could be avoided if we simply take time to think about what we say and think about what we do, the shock waves could be avoided, as well as the subsequent ripple effects that carry on for a long time. I'm out in the woods today. It's been a number of days since I've been able to get out here. In the midst of all the other stuff going on, we've had some very personal stuff take place that has, in a very real way, altered our lives. And they'll, I'll say more about that as time goes on. But it's been a long time since I've been out here, and it's drastically hot, it's drastically humid. If you hear mosquitoes buzzing the camera, there's an abundant crop of mosquitoes. I'm looking around as well. I'm looking at a lot of chanterelles, wild chanterelle mushrooms that have, since the rain started a few weeks ago, that have just exploded. They're everywhere, and I need to get back out here, lather up good with insect repellent, and get out here and pick a nice meal of chanterelle mushrooms. Now, a number of weeks ago, I started doing a series on the Sermon on the Mount. And I've got to tell you that back in January, December, January, along about that time, I began to sense that there were some significant changes coming. I had no real idea about what was, all of this mess that's going on around us, affecting the world in dire, crazy ways. I certainly had no clue as to the personal stuff, but that long back I began to sense that some very significant changes were coming, and I felt impelled at the time that I really needed to dig in to the Sermon on the Mount. And it'd been a long time since I'd read the Sermon on the Mount, and I started reading it and rereading it. And a few weeks ago, I started doing a video series on the Sermon on the Mount, and calling it something up on Mount Eremos, going up onto the mountain with Jesus. And it's been a tremendously personally rewarding thing to do, is to dig into the Sermon on the Mount, because what Jesus taught in the Sermon on the Mount is the preamble, it's the keynote address that Jesus gave when he started his earthly ministry. And if we miss what Jesus is teaching in the Sermon on the Mount, we miss it all, because we will misinterpret, we will live our lives in a way that misrepresents him and what he taught. And I know that's a bold statement, but I'll stand by it. If we miss what Jesus is teaching in the Sermon on the Mount, our Christianity really isn't what Jesus taught. It's some kind of complex blend of worldliness and paganism and all this other stuff that's a part of this world. Rather than kingdom ideals, we're living by worldly ideals. And that's really significant to remember. Not only are there a great many mosquitoes out, but if you listen in the distance to the east, it's beginning to build up. It's thundering over there. So I want to do this rather quickly and make my way back to the cabin and get out of it, because our typical blow-up thunderstorms are generally pretty vicious, and I don't want to be out here under these trees while that's going on. When you read the Sermon on the Mount, especially the Beatitudes, reading the Beatitudes is like reading about the fruit of the Spirit. You know, in Galatians chapter 5, when Paul is talking about the fruit of the Spirit is, and he lists, whether you reading in some translations you've got 9 sections of fruit, or other, the Douay-Rheims lists 12 fruit of the Spirit, but it's one single fruit with multiple sections. It's like peeling an orange, and here you have all of these sections, but it's one orange. And that's the way it is with the fruit of the Spirit. That's the way it is with what Jesus is teaching in the Beatitudes. He's saying, here are the character traits of Christians. Here are the character traits of those who, more than simply give me lip service, but here are the character traits of those who yield their lives to my tutelage and honestly, earnestly follow me. Now that's what Jesus is teaching in the Beatitudes. And he says, seeing the multitudes, he went up into a mountain, and when he was set down, his disciples came to him. And opening his mouth, he taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the meek, for they shall possess the land. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are they that hunger and thirst after justice, after righteousness, after a just way of living, for they shall have their fill. And then he says in verse 7, Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. I think of 2 characters in a story that Jesus told. One was the Pharisee who stood and pounded his breast and said, Here I am. Here I am, Lord. I tithe such and so. I do this. I do that. Here's what I'm doing to signify that I'm right. I'm right in the eyes of man, religious man. I'm right in the eyes of God, therefore. And then there was the other, the poor sinner, who stood there and he said, Have mercy on me, a sinner. And that wonderful Jesus prayer comes from that. Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. What is it that we desire when we see God? What is it that we personally have to offer God as payment? What do we have to offer God that can honestly procure our access into heaven? What is it we depend on from God? When we stand there before God, totally humbled, because we know our sins, we know the things that have kept us from living the fullness of the reality of the grace of God in our lives. We've chosen to do other things that interfere with that grace. Mercy. Only the mercy of God will allow us into heaven. Only the mercy of God will spare us from hell. Only the mercy of God will spare us from any kind of eternal punishment, any kind of eternal condemnation. And Jesus said, "Blessed are the merciful." Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. If we're living in a way in this world that denies mercy, who are we to expect that God, the one who gave his only begotten Son, who lived his life and died a brutal, ugly, vicious death on our behalf because of our sin, if we fail to show mercy, who are we to expect God to show mercy toward us?